Hey girl, open the walls, play with your dolls. We'll be a perfect family when you walk.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Jaren, and today we are talking about Coraline, the 15th anniversary. Wandering around her rambling old house in her boring old town, 11-year-old Coraline discovers a hidden door to a strangely idealized version of her life. But in order to stay in the fantasy, she must make a frighteningly real sacrifice. Amongst the many titles that I have seen for the Fathom events, for anniversary screenings, a lot of people must be wondering, Jaren, why are you reviewing Coraline out of all movies? And I'm embarrassed to say, ladies and gents, because I have never actually seen Coraline up until a couple weeks ago. As far as my knowledge and movie-going experiences, as far as Leica Animation Studios go, I've only seen Paranorman, which I absolutely adore and favor, and The Box Trolls, which was not my cup of tea. And up until 2 weeks ago, when I actually seen the movie, I have only heard great things about Coraline. I even bought the 4K disc and never got around to it. Then my girlfriend Leanne thought that, wow, you know what? The 15th anniversary of Coraline is coming up at our local Regal movie theater. Why not we make that my first viewing experience? And we finally got around to it. This was the first stop-motion animation to be shot entirely in 3D. Unfortunately, I did not get to participate in the 3D experience because the show I wanted to go to happens to be the 2D show only. So I'm sure it would have been spectacular. I was very entranced with everything from the opening credits to the final frame. Just a lot of detail and texture really popped off the screen when it came to the characters and the set designs. I love the color contrast that is used to characterize a lot of emotions, wardrobe, and even backdrops. A lot of the real world has a lot of these bleak and gray colors, whereas to the fantasy world, where Coraline is very tantalized by, has a lot more vivid and vibrant aesthetics. But those black button eyes really give me the creeps, though. The adaptation to Neil Gaiman's novel went through some interesting obstacles from pre-production to the production itself. Thinking that they were going to start off with doing a live-action iteration of the film, they actually hired Dakota Fanning to come in and audition for the titular role. And once they decided to switch over to stop-motion animation, Dakota Fanning thought that they were going to fire her, and then they really asked her if she could still lend her voice to the blue-haired protagonist. She was even more excited when she found out what Coraline was going to look like through drawings, through models. There was actually 24 dolls that were made of Coraline, and with the 10 puppeteers that took to create her, they had 207,336 facial expressions and combinations that were practically removed and reattached frame by frame for the entire film. Now, getting into the film itself, I absolutely loved this movie. It is no wonder it has such a cult following and beloved fan base. Now, I am not familiar with the original source material, but writer-director Henry Selick has outdone himself once again with the visual world building, whether it comes down to the mystique of the Pink Palace apartments or the other world that's beyond it. I mean, there's a lot of contradicting themes and metaphors when it comes down to where Coraline lives and where she visits. Maybe it's a metaphor for the living and the dead, the real world versus a fantasy realm in which we feel more loved in. Now, there's just something so horrific, yet so heartfelt when it comes to this movie. Uncomfortable, yet very inviting. And I think that's what really hooked me in and locked me into how I really enjoyed this film. Starting off with our titular protagonist, Coraline, I gotta admit, in the beginning, she seemed a little bit grating to tolerate. She's an 11-year-old girl who is homesick, she misses her friends, and she is trying her best to adjust to this new living situation. Her parents come off as very dismissive and very busy with their careers to even care about anything else in their lives. And you really start to get that perspective, really get very empathetic about what she's going through to see how outside she feels at the moment. Once we get into that other world, being introduced to her other parents, there are just the devil in the details that mirrors exactly what she's familiar with, what makes her content, and the love and affections from her actual parents that she's been longing for. Now, the one dead giveaway that keeps her from falling for this facade is the sewn-on buttons for eyes. And I don't care how nice they are, this is just pure nightmare fuel if you ask me. I was kind of nervous that the apartment neighbors were going to drag down the pacing of the film because we do have Coraline kind of jumping in and out from the fantasy realm to the real world, and in the real world we do have her weird neighbors, and I think that they really enriched a lot of the interactions and relationships they had with Coraline, and it really makes up for a lot of the strange and quirky sequences that happen a lot later, especially with YB, Mr. Bobinski, Spink, and Forcible. They're really deliver all these off-kilter, off-key sort of elements to their characters. And the genius part that I thought about when it came to bringing these supporting characters full circle is how we got to know their otherworld counterparts and seeing a lot of their desired talents and possible backstories, which makes the characters a lot more rich, a lot more flavorful. And I think that was such a brilliant way to have a lot of exposition for these characters without having to sidebar the audience for a lot of heavy narrative. Once the cat starts speaking like Keith David and the otherworldly parents begin to unravel like beings who belong in the Nightmare Before Christmas, the horror element went a little harder than I expected. There were some unsettling and startling images and moments that really got under my skin. And then immediately, I found myself in the shoes of Coraline. Very small, very vulnerable, trying to escape this dreamlike turn nightmare. No joke, guys. I genuinely had a nightmare after seeing this movie about my face getting sewn on, like just full of buttons. The transition of how this other world becomes so mesmerizing and then later on transformed into something so chilling was just superbly executed. I mean, that is exactly how you pull the rug out from under your audience. Considering the amount of world building that went into this particular story, from book to script to script to storyboards, from storyboards to the actual animation. And it always got me curious as a curious cat about how this world building works. For example, number 1, how and where do the Beldam dolls come from? Number 2, how does Spink and Forcible have a particular device that sees true nature? Number 3, do the other neighbors lead on more than what they know about the Beldam and the portal? I mean, because I did not get the right vibes when it came to Mr. Bobinski or YB. Number 4, now if this other world happens to take on a double of what is in the real world, how come there is only one cat and one key? Number 5, is the Beldam and the other beings considered demons, witches, or some kind of other supernatural beings that are lurking in this Pink Palace apartments? I do have a lot more questions, but I'm starting to feel like I'm better off having to go on YouTube and search up theory and explanation videos about Coraline. Alright, so I got done skimming a few YouTube videos and damn. There are a lot of analysis, theory, and breakdown videos out there that are still being made to this day. I really respect you guys for those who have devoted a lot of time and research to get all of this down. I mean, you guys are the real fans. I really do entertain the idea that the Beldam could possibly be a witch or some kind of fairy / changeling. I thought that was very thought-provoking. Also, the thought-provoking process of the relationships between parents and children, as well as the representation of the garden and some of the animals / pets that are seen throughout the film. And then there's the possibility of Coraline could be possibly dead before the movie even started, which I think is a little bit of a cop-out, and also being possibly trapped in the other dimension forever. I think that was kind of weird the way that movie ended. And then I know Henry Selick has talked about omitting the grandmother, YB's grandmother, from the original script, from the original story, because she felt like too much of a plot device. And if I'm going to be honest, and I would be totally up for it, if we did see some kind of prequel where YB's grandmother came into contact with the Beldam for the very first time. Overall, I think this is a cautionary tale of someone who is willing to give you everything you want. I did not expect to love this movie as much as I did, but Paranorman will remain in a special place in my heart. As far as comparing Henry Selick's work, I do think, and I stand very heavily opinionated on this, I do think that Coraline is a better movie than The Nightmare Before Christmas. Enough said. It's a perfect blend of a family film and horror all rolled up into one. It's so perfect. Guys, if you haven't had the chance to check this out like me, go ahead and check it out on the biggest screen you can in 3D if you could, or if you have it at home, it's a perfect time to pop it in for the 15th anniversary. All right, guys, that's all I got to say about that movie. Go ahead and check it out if you want. I'm Jaren Agbanawag, and I want to thank you guys again for taking some time out of your day to hear me talk some movies. I do have some reviews for you for Blink Twice and Strange Darling, so look forward to that. It's just been a very hefty and heavy week for me, especially with work and celebrating birthdays. Big shout out to mom and dad for both having August birthdays, may I add, and for anybody else who had August birthdays to celebrate. In the meantime, take care, and I'll see you guys at the theater.